Hello, everybody. Welcome. StreamYard has been giving me a bit of a stuttering problem with buffering and things like that. And so if you've seen some starts and stops over the last couple of shows that we've done, then I'm working on it. I have a feeling it's probably my laptop. My laptop is very slowly failing. And it's old. It's been around a while. And I'm hoping it can give me a little bit of time um, to make some room on my Best Buy card so that I can pick up something new from Best Buy. So hopefully we can all trudge through that and the shows can continue. But anyway, in the meantime, what are we doing right now? Of course, this is the Saturday Spiritualist. Let me see if I can get that out a little bit better. I'm still getting over where I bit my cheek like a week ago. It's just finally getting where my tongue isn't scraping up against it. It's always horrible when I do that, and it makes me talk funny for like several days. But of course, this is once again the Saturday Spiritualist presented by This Uncanny Earth, and is going live on the This Uncanny Earth YouTube channel and This Uncanny Earth official Facebook group. Whew, it's a lot to say all at once. So far, this is episode 3, and we have had some good discussions so far. The first episode was a general breakdown of all things spiritual versus things religious and where they coincide and where they separate. The second episode, I got into Wicca, and I've only touched the surface of that. Most of these, I'm only going to touch the surface, dig in just a smidge on them to give you some basics and a good introduction, and maybe try to gain a little bit better understanding as a whole of the spirituality that we're talking about. So this week, we're getting into something that was pretty much inevitable, because no talk about spiritualism and the occult and anything like that would be complete without mention of the great beast himself, once known as the most evil man in the world. And that, of course, would be Mr. Aleister Crowley. Now, Aleister Crowley was around in the 1900s. He lived between 1875 to 1947. And he was one of the most famous, and still is one of the most influential occult figures in a growing landscape of spiritualist traditions. He was a member of many different spiritual groups. He was part of the Golden Dawn. He was part of the AOA. He was a part of even more than that, honestly. And the list is so long that I can't even recall it off the top of my head. And I have several of his books here. And my scotch, of course. But Crowley was an interesting person. He was an English writer. He was a mystic. He was an occultist. He was an artist. And he got into a lot of different things. He earned his nicknames, the most evil man in the world, the Great Beast 666, because of a lot of his deviant tendencies, which were not always many of them were meant, appearance-wise, to shock people, to bother people, or to draw in the people who might be interested in the things he had to say. And he got pretty deep into sex magic. Specifically, he got into a lot of like orgies and things like that, which he supposedly used for group workings, which is group magical rituals. Although, to be fair, I think a lot of that ended up just him having a good time, and the people around him kind of having just a good time, and a lot of the actual meaning and symbology getting lost in the shuffle, so to speak. But he was a very interesting character. He has been infamous, I suppose. One of the things he was infamous for was making references to sacrificing your children during rituals. And like most of the things he said, it was metaphor. He didn't intend for you to take a physical child and cause them harm and things like that. He meant to pleasure yourself, and the male seed would be your children, sacrificing your children and things like that. So he was a character. He was definitely a character. The most famous, most influential spirituality that he founded is called Thelema, and it's the basis for a good majority of other traditions. A lot of Wicca is derived from Thelema, but there's a few other schools of thought that say that Wicca is based off of a completely separate tradition that just ended up coinciding with some of the things that Thelema had, and then they kind of ran together in similar circles. But Thelema, um, it's based off a transliteration of a Greek noun, which is also will, and it's from the verb thelo, to will, wish, want, or purpose. And that was Crowley's big thing. He was big into willpower. He was big into using your mind and the the effects that theater could have on the mind to cause things to happen. Because if you believed that things would happen strongly enough, then there was a good chance that they would, and that's how he lived his life. And he figured the more people did that, the more people would be able to control their own lives rather than become part of organized religion. And Thelema was the center of everything that he did. Um, he began that by writing a text called the Book of the Law, which I have a copy here. Um, there's not a lot to it. It's not very lengthy, but it is very dense, and it's dense in a way because Crowley loved metaphor, and he loved to steep everything in mystical wordage and verbiage and things. Now, supposedly he wrote this at the instruction of someone else. So if you asked him, he would say, "This is how I received it," and he believed that it was delivered to him, dictated to him, by a non-corporeal entity named Iwas. And Iwas supposedly channeled its way through his wife at the time, Rose Edith, in Cairo in Egypt while they were spending time there. And so through his wife, the words were given to him. He wrote them down, and he wrote the Book of the Law, which is also called Liber al Legis. A liber is, of course, a Latin term for a grimoire or a textbook that's sacred in nature. So, and like I said, I have a copy and I've read it, and it is pretty dense. And there's a ton of metaphorical things in there and a lot of allegorical things in there. And it's hard to say how much of it really makes an impact. And that's not really the best way to say it. It's like there are some things in there that are really interesting. There's some really interesting philosophical concepts in there about balance and about keeping yourself content and spiritually complete. But there's so much other stuff in there that doesn't make a whole lot of sense really, and you'd have to do a lot of digging and a lot of kind of thought and things. And that's kind of again, that's Crowley's calling card. He liked to do these things in ways that the casual person would either just shrug it off, the interested person would have difficulty and would put it down because they didn't understand it, and the special person that it was aimed at would see through all those things and learn something from it. And whether that's actually like something that's whether he meant for that or whether it's just a gag on his part, who knows? He did have a bit of a tricky nature. Um, Now he has a pantheon, a Thelemic pantheon of deities, um, and It's never fully clear if they either literally exist or they serve as archetypes and metaphors themselves. And some of them are adapted from ancient Egyptian spirituality. Nuit Hadit and Rahurkut, mouthfuls. And at least once, he is quoted as saying that he describes the deities in the Book of the Law as a literary convenience. So let's revisit that for a second. Let's go on a little bit of a tangent. Thelema, the core philosophy and everything invented by Crowley, went on to inform many, many, many Hermetic traditions afterwards, and is still considered the cornerstone of a lot of those things today for people who are involved in ritual occultism. And yet, if you read Crowley's work and you're perceptive and you read between the lines a little bit, and I'm not saying there's hidden code and there's stuff like that, like you got to be a smart person to dig through it, because it's not really the case. You just need to pay attention to what you're reading. You'll notice a lot of contradictory things. And so it's hard to say, or maybe it isn't hard to say at all, that the whole thing was potentially a joke on the part of Crowley, and that he never really intended it to become something particularly serious, but he set it out as a prank and continued to laugh at the people who made it serious ever after. And that's a possibility because he was that kind of a person from all accounts. Um, he also had several other inspired quote unquote writings that he collectively termed the Holy Books of Thelema. And he brought in concepts from other occultism that had grown up to then, yoga, Eastern and Western mysticism, and the Kabbalah, which is the Jewish sorcery. Not necessarily sorcery, because sorcerers and sorcery was bad, but Jewish mysticism, Jewish mysticism. Um, Another thing that he inspired from Thelema, which will give you some idea of what it's kind of like delving into his writings, is was a it heavily influenced what's around now called chaos magic. Chaos magic is borders on absurdism in ways that it's meant to make things in life so random and uh, so silly almost that your mind sees everything through the same lens. You see the entirety of all existence as absurd, which means that there are no rules and no structures, which means you can set all of that for yourself without fear. I've known a few people who believed that they were part of chaos magic, and I don't know. It seems almost like a fad thing sometimes, but I've read things from other people who were serious about it, and it's hard to tell whether they're have mental illnesses or not. I mean, I don't want to say that in a negative fashion. I don't want to call anybody um, mentally sick or anything just because of what they believe. But it takes some characters. It sure does. Um, Now that's supposedly concepts from Thelema have also even influenced the development of Scientology. Some people argue against that and say that that's just coincidence, but it is an interesting coincidence. It shows the far reach that Thelema has had. Um, Now let's take a look at some of the beliefs. Now the symbol for Thelema is a unicursal hexagram, and I'm going to see if I can. I have it on my phone here. I'm going to see if you guys can see it. That's a unicursal hexagram. Okay, it's almost got like a 5-leafed flower of some kind in the middle. All right, that's the symbol of Thelema. Um, Now let's get back to some facts. The Book of the Law has 3 chapters. I did say it was not very lengthy. Um, and Crowley claims that he wrote each of them in exactly 1 hour each. Um, and he wrote that he took dictation from an entity named Iwas, and he later identified that as his holy guardian angel. So he would continue to mention this being and to supposedly consult and not necessarily pray to, but convene his mind with, I guess, with Iwas in the future. Um, and he said, in typical Crowley fashion, that no forger could have prepared so complex a set of numerical and literal puzzles, and that study of the text would dispel all doubts about the method of how the book was obtained. Crowley was who Crowley was. Um, let's see here. He has the Book of the Law basically takes 3 statements called axioms, and they distill the whole practice and the ethics of everything. Um, the law of Thelema is the primary one. It forms a central doctrine, and it's the only dogma involved. It says, and you've probably heard this before, if you've gotten into any kind of spirituality, any kind of left hand or occult spirituality, you've heard this before. It's do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. It's part 1. And it's added to by a second statement. Love is the law, love under will. And those two, I'll get to the meanings in a second. The third one, the third axiom, is one that I've used because it's super interesting, and I've told people about this. Every man and every woman is a star. Okay, so let's dig into what he meant with all this. First one, do what thou wilt should be the whole of the law. He meant for that if you are part of Thelema, you should seek out and follow your own true path and find or determine your own true will. That means to get in touch with your own willpower, to look at the universe your own way without having any other structures or rules informing it, and to live your life in accordance with that. It's be authentic to how you want to be as possible without compromise. Loves the law, love under will. He says that the nature of the law of Thelema is love, but that love itself is subsidiary to finding and manifesting one's authentic purpose or mission. So you're supposed to love yourself, love others, love everything around you, but not at the expense of your own personal will and your own personal path, which is very interesting as well. It's very much based on personal freedom, which is what we're going to get into in a lot of the different things we're going to look at in this series. Personal freedom is a big deal compared to binding yourself to another spiritual entity, which is what organized religion does. And the third axiom, every man and every woman is a star, and that's a reference to Plato's body of light, which said that we're made of the same substance as the stars. We're all stardust. We're all made from the same thing that's in the heavens. So what's the energy of space is in us, and we are part of it. And as you work your willpower within, it can cause changes without, just like what happens on the planet occurs in space, etc., as above, so below, vice versa. So he was in tune with all that when he wrote these. It wasn't a foreign concept. The as above, so below idea was not a foreign concept at the time. And of course, it draws a lot from ancient Egyptian religion. The highest deity in his ideas of Thelema is the goddess Nut. And she is the night sky arched over the earth, symbolized in the form of a naked woman. And this is something directly from Egyptian literature. You can correspond with this, and you can kind of compare back and forth. She's called the Great Mother, the ultimate source of all things, the collection of all possibilities, infinite space, and the infinite stars thereof, and the circumference of an infinite circle or sphere. He also called her Our Lady of the Stars, the Queen of Space, and the Queen of Heaven. And that is a view that the Egyptians had of space itself. They gave everything an aspect of a deity. They saw the stars as glittering points in the cloak of Nuit. Even though she was supposed to be a naked woman, she had like a cloak of stars. Um, so everything had a correspondence. Whether they actually believed there was a real physical flesh and blood being up there with all the stars attached to her is kind of irrelevant. It's the belief that she was there as an image that was the point, and that's how they had their spirituality. Everything was based on correspondences. Now the second main deity in Thelema is Hadit, and he's, as Crowley says, he conceived him as an infinitely small point to complement the vastness and infinite vastness of Nuit. And Hadit symbolizes for Crowley and Thelema manifestation, motion, and time. And Crowley calls him the flame that burns in every heart of man and in the core of every star. Um, and once again, you get the parallels between the as above, so below. What happens within happens without. And that's kind of the core of both Thelema and a lot of these spiritualities. It's that in order to make changes in your life, in your environment, in your community, you have to also make changes within yourself. Everything is in tune, everything is connected. If you work on bettering yourself, you will in time then be able to work on bettering your environment, bettering the people that you spend time around, bettering the greater community around you. And that's the whole real reason behind the correspondences of as above, so below. It's all an internal and external harmony sort of thing. Now, not everybody who gets into these kind of spiritualities actually follows through with that very well. It, and I'm gonna kind of go off on a little side tangent here about that as well. We all know that it's difficult to coexist sometimes with things that are going out in the world. Like there's here in the United States, my groceries, on average, my monthly groceries have gone up by $200 or $300 monthly, and that's a huge thing. And so it's and how do I put it? It's fair to say, I suppose, that I can't just look at that and be like, oh, well, I believe that's going to change, so it's going to change, and then expect it to change right off the bat. And that's really where the disconnect is sometimes, because a lot of the people who get into this kind of stuff who are kind of on the shallow end of the spectrum, they'll be like, okay, well, if I just believe that I can change everything around me, I can, and it will, and that's that, and I'm going to change everything for the better, and nothing's going to stop me. And that's not exactly how it works. There's a lot of reality that sets in. Reality is a powerful force, whether whether it's money or medical problems or politics or whatever. All of these different things will intrude on your thoughts and take up space, and they will convince you in 1,000 little ways. Oh, you can't do this because of this reason. Oh, you can't do that because of this reason. Oh, you can't do this because of this reason. And then you have a bunch of doubts and a bunch of things that just they get in there. And so you don't make a lot of headway. But it's not about instant gratification. It's not about waking up one day and be like, you know what? I'm tired of my life being the way it is. Things are going to change today. And then you cause it to change that day. It is not possible in so short a time span. And a lot of this is all based on years of effort. It's what Crowley called and what many occultists call the great work. The great work is this years and decades long ritual that you bend your willpower and your mind to constantly. It's a transformative thing that as you aspire to it, it changes you for the better, and it allows you to accept things more readily, or to nudge things a little bit in your life and to work towards things so that you can transform yourself in a way where a lot of these little things out there get even smaller, and where the big things become little things. It's about changing your attitudes and changing. And you know what? Like I said, I can't make my grocery bills go down, but I can do different things to be content, to be comfortable. I can change up what I buy. So even if I spend the same amount of money, I might get different foods that maybe will get more to eat that are still tasty, or things like that. I don't have to cut such corners that I'm living off of um, dry noodles and nothing else. No, none of the other stuff. So, or like saltines or something. I don't have to do that. I just have to be creative, and that's another part of it. It's creativity. It's thinking outside the box. It's making subtle changes close to home that will eventually change your outlook of the things farther out. And you might not mind some of the other things so much. It doesn't mean necessarily making compromises. It just means starting with yourself and working out from there over a long period of time. And I can't say that I'm always very successful about it myself. I know it's a very difficult thing. I make it sound sometimes like I've got it figured out, and like it's super easy. And it's not that easy. And Crowley knew it wasn't that easy. But then Crowley also went out of his way to do crazy things with his life, to mix things up, to make it look like maybe he was far more successful, and you know, to throw off the yoke of everyday things. And that's why he got into such deviant stuff. He got into the orgies. He got into a lot of medicinal substances and such and whatnot. And that's how he wanted to live his life, and he felt he was successful. So that's what it's all about. It's about working on the inside and making progress on the outside, not overnight change. Um, Tangent over. Back to Thelema. The third deity in Thelema is Rahurkut. Rahurkut. I don't have any idea if I'm saying all that right, but I'm trying to. And that's a manifestation of Horus. And he's associated with the sun and the active energies of Thelemic magic. So if you were doing a Thelemic ritual, pardon me, getting out of the way here, uh, he would be the one that you would invoke to focus your mind on the causing of things to happen. It can get a little complicated, but and we're not going to get into. I don't think this series is going to get too much into how to do a ritual so much. I mean, I'm not going to become a handbook for how to summon up Asmodeus and all these other weird, that's something else. If you want to go use your Ouija board, or if you want to go do your summoning circle, you find another show for that. I'm just explaining some things for you. Um, Now, moving on, the the center of everything that Crowley was involved in, he said that he said that every individual has a true will, which he was distinguished as separate from ordinary wants and desires of the ego. So me, I like to collect transforming robots. When I see a new one come out, I'm like, oh, I got to save some money. I got to get that new transformer. That's not exercising the true will. That's just something that I want. Okay. The true will details your calling, um, and your purpose in life, which again can be kind of difficult to ascertain because I don't think we have individually a single purpose or a single calling or things. I think we can do many different things and feel fulfilled. Um, and so when Crowley says, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," he doesn't say just run around do whatever you want, no protection, no nothing, just like hey and whatnot. But in acting in response to a calling, it's using your will to change things actively to make yourself more content. I keep thinking I'm trying to say condensed, but that's not it. Content and comfortable. Um, According to a Thelemite named Lon Milo Duquette, he says that a Thelemite is anyone who bases their actions on striving to accomplish their true will. And when a person does their true will, it is like an orbit, their niche in the universal order, and the universe assists them. He goes on to say, quote, "But the magician knows that the pure will of every man and every woman is already in perfect harmony with the divine will. In fact, they are one and the same." And that's another part of what Crowley believed in. He said that it, the divine will was a universal consciousness that everybody could tap into, that everybody could share. And it wasn't like we're all one, we're all absolutely the same, let's all think the same way. It was we're all connected. We're all one people. We can all work together towards the same goals while still being individual people. And this is where we get to why Crowley did supposedly. This was his defense. This is why Crowley said he did some of the things that he did, like the orgies and the drugs and all that other kind of stuff. Um, he said that in order to discover your true will, you have to overcome socially instilled inhibitions, and you have to be deconditioned. Okay, you had to free the desires of the subconscious mind from the control of the conscious mind, especially the restrictions placed on sexual expression, which he associated with the power of divine creation. And that's kind of where things get a little strange with Crowley, and where he's not always very reliable. He had a lot of good ideas, but when he says that you're not supposed to devolve into hedonism and you're not supposed to do that, I think he did many, many times, and I think he didn't mind. I feel like in the act of throwing off his inhibitions, he kind of got a little consumed by some of them, which does happen to a lot of these great figures of some of these spiritualities. I don't think it's difficult. There's a lot of addictions out in the world. Having been an addict myself about 16, 17 years ago now, maybe. It's been a long time since I can pinpoint when exactly I feel like I stopped being an addict, as in being like a slave to a substance. Um, but I remember the feeling. I still remember what it was like, and I still carry that little kernel of like it's still in there. I mean, potentially that kind of thing could still happen to me. I don't like to think so, and I feel like I'm a stronger person. But and we've had Ingrained Cyclist in the chat room here, and I've been on a roll, so I haven't been checking on his chats. But he's got a couple things to say. One he just said is, "That reminds me of a question I heard. Where do you go when no one is chasing you? Meaning, what choices do you make if nothing else is influencing you?" And that is a good point. Um, most of what we do in life is reactionary. Most of what we do is in response to other things. We don't often we feel like making our own path is a luxury that we can't really, we don't have the circumstances for. And I don't think that's true. I think we can take a lot of steps to make ourselves comfortable and to make ourselves spiritually fulfilled. We just have to look at things a little differently. We have to kind of bend the rules a little bit. And I don't mean like as far as crime and as far as like that kind of thing, but we have to think outside the box. We have to think out literally, like stop constraining ourselves to how everything tells you to look at things, and try to come up with some wacky things to try. And I'm not the most like hey kind of person, but I do look for alternate ways to solve things and to think through situations. I don't like to be constrained by a single choice. I like to always believe I have choices, multiple choices. When people say stuff like, which would you rather do, this or this? I'm like, option number 3. And they're like, you can't choose that. And I'm always like, yes, I can. There was always another option, no matter what. If somebody has a gun to your head, you can choose to do what they tell you. You can choose to fight back, or you can choose something else. There's something else. There's another choice always. And maybe they're all bad choices, but at least you have the chance to choose. It reminds me of a joke too. And it's a religious joke. And I don't mean it's a religious offensive joke. I mean, it's a joke that's supposed to be pro religious, but I think you can apply it in a lot of different situations. And you've probably heard this. This is probably those. Stop me if you've heard this one. There was a person. Would you say he's a man just for simplicity? You can be a man, woman, whatever joke you want to tell, you tell it your own way. Okay. But there was a man in his house, and there's a flood coming. Not like a biblical Noah flood, just like there's a hurricane, and there's a flood coming. So people going door to door, like local law enforcement, whatever. They're trying to get people evacuated. They say, "Come on, sir, we can get you out before it gets bad." He says, "Nope, nope. I'm a faithful person. I believe that my God will protect me because I'm faithful and I'm a good Christian person." And they say, "Okay," and they leave. The water gets higher. He has to go to the second floor of his house. Some folks come along in a boat, okay, and they notice he's in his house and they're like, "Hey, you know what? Come out through the window. We'll save you. We can get out of here. I mean, the water's out here." He says, "Nope, nope. My God will protect me. I'm a faithful person. I'm a good person. I'll be fine." And they say, "Okay," and they leave him. Water gets higher. He eventually has to crawl out of his house onto his roof, and a helicopter comes by picking up stragglers, and they're like, "Hey, come on, jump on the rope. We'll save you." He's like, "Nope, nope. My God will protect me. I'm faithful. I'm a good person." And they say, "Okay," and they leave. The water keeps rising. He drowns. Uh, he arrives in the afterlife. He's there before God or whoever, and he says, "Man, I died. Like, what happened? I had faith in you. I thought you were supposed to protect me. I mean, what happened?" And God looks at him and goes, "I sent you people on your door. I sent you a boat. I sent you a helicopter. You didn't take any of it." And that's what it is. You don't have to apply this in a religious thing, but as a spiritual thing, you can't be so faithful to the point that you don't do things for yourself. And that's what the whole point of things like Thelema and a lot of the spiritual things is. You have to make choices for yourself. You have to sometimes pick the hard choices. You have to sometimes go against your gut and just be like, you know what, logically, this makes sense. I should do this because otherwise, I don't know if this other thing's going to happen. You don't focus on other things saving you. You work on saving yourself. And that's not to say never to have faith in other people or to have faith in other concepts or whatever. It just means that sometimes faith is also about seeing what's right in front of you. It's about seeing the obvious and exercising that. So let's see what else we can get from Thelema here. Now, ethically, and it has some standards on individual conduct, supposedly. With the do what they will, do what thou wilt. It's supposed to be the whole of the law and also as a human right. And some people say that this includes an obligation to allow others to do their own wills without interference. Now, Crowley makes no clear statement on that. So I look at um, I look at that as You can do what you want, but you can't interfere with other people doing what they want. And likewise, they're not supposed to interfere with you doing what you want. And that doesn't mean that everybody's all individual and they all just run off and like do whatever all the time individually. It just means that if what you want is going to harm someone else or interrupt someone else or cause an issue for somebody else, then you need to, it's not really an individual thing. It's not just benefiting you, it's causing someone else negative energy or whatnot. Um, and further, it says that Crowley, like he elaborated on this by saying that includes the right to live by your own law, live in the way that you will to do, work, play, and rest as you will, die when and how you will, eat and drink what you will, live where you will, move about the earth as you want, think, speak, write, draw, paint, carve, etch, mold, build, and dress as you will, love when, where, and with whom one will. But he also said that you could kill those who would thwart these rights. And that's a touchy thing. That's he couched a lot of that in metaphor, and I don't think he meant to go out and murder anybody who you thought would try and stop you from doing these things. I think he meant more that you should excise them from your life. You should avoid them. You should not let people in your circle, so to speak, that are going to be working against you or trying to limit you. And that again isn't to say that you should just go out and do whatever you want, because if you do whatever you want, there's a chance you're going to step on somebody else's toes and then you're going to be preventing them from doing what they want. So it's kind of a paradox, but it is, that's Crowley. That's how Crowley was. He said that you had a duty to the self because you are the center of your own universe. Um, he said you had a duty to others, um, which is to avoid interfering with their wills and to enlighten them and to, you know, join them in their joyousness. He said you had a duty to mankind, and that should be that you should act in a way that people will see you and say, "Hey, why do you act this way?" "Oh, that's because I follow this Thelema. Let me tell you about it." It wasn't to go out and be like, "Hey, have you heard the good word of the Thelema today?" It's to be able to help spread why you feel the way that you do on a friendly way. Um, and he also says that the law of Thelema should be applied to all problems and used to decide every ethical question. And it is a violation of the law of Thelema to use any animal or object for a purpose for which it is unfit, or to ruin things so that they are useless for their purpose. Natural resources can be used by man, but this should not be done wantonly, or the breach of the law will be avenged. So he said again, he said not to do things to excess and not to break things in an effort to make yourself feel good. Don't go out and cause rampant death and destruction, and don't go out and just kill and feast on as many creatures in the wilds as you want, or as many um, plants of the field or whatever, because everyone needs things to survive, so you can't take everything for yourself. Um, and so it's meant to be very balancing, even though it is kind of difficult to see through some of that stuff. And the metaphors and the allegories do kind of take over. And once again, Crowley himself was not immune to falling victim to his own negativity. He, again, did get into a lot of sexual deviancy, supposedly in the name of Thelema, and he was a bit of a glutton, and he got into some heavy drugs and things, a lot of injectable substances. So where does that leave us? Where does that leave us? I like a lot of the concepts of Thelema. I like the do what thou wilt idea as a basis for not do what you want, but do as you will, as your willpower pushes you forward. I like that idea, and I've used that a lot in my own life in over the last decade or so. Um, since I did a lot of my early research in, it's actually been 2 decades now, because it's been longer than 17 years since I was clean. Actually, it's been, man, time runs together. But it's been at least a couple decades, maybe, or a decade and a half. Who knows? Um, and so where was I going with that? I got sidetracked on my time and everything. Let me see if I can collect my brain thoughts here, because they're shooting all over the place now. The do what thou wilt has always been kind of a central thing for me, about using your willpower to improve your circumstances and to improve yourself, really. And and I've applied that to a lot of things. I've done a lot of research, and that seems to be the central tenet for a lot of things that I've drifted towards over the years. And and I think that's really a good place to start. I think we should always start with examining our inner selves and be like, so what is it that you want in life? Cut out the thoughts about money, cut out the thoughts about food and toys and everything and all the goods and stuff. What is it that you want that would help, not make you feel better, but help you feel better about where you are in life? Take a look at that, start from there, look at what's feasible to start with now and what might have to wait till later, organize all that, and look into changing your mindset on how you're going to approach these kind of things. Because whether you're in a good mood, whether you're in a bad mood, whether you believe you're happy or sad or whatever, it is all in your mind. I mean, that sounds simplistic, and I don't want to downplay people with depression and anxiety and things like that, because I know you can't just sit back and tell yourself, "Well, stop being anxious. Well, stop being depressed. We'll stop being that." I know you cannot do that. I understand that, and I don't want to tell people that. But I do think the first step towards coexisting with these things and improving your overall mindset and helping you feel like a better person is to start inside and say, what can I do to improve how I feel about these things? It's not overnight. It's not even like within a week or within a month or within a year or within 5 years. It's a constant exercise. It's a constant, what can I do today to improve myself? What can I do tomorrow to improve myself? I woke up in a crappy mood. What can I do today to kind of not be in a crappy mood? Is it something that I can change, or is it something that I can't change? If I can't change it, what can I do to lessen the bad feelings? Not necessarily cure them, but what can I do to lessen them? And there's so many little things. Maybe have an extra cup of coffee. Maybe have an extra snack. Not necessarily eat and pay out of like a 2 tubs of ice cream or something like that. Not Don't do things as coping mechanisms, but maybe get up off the couch an extra couple times and just walk around the house. Just get the blood moving a little bit. Drink some more water. Maybe go for a walk around the neighborhood real quick. Not very far. You don't got to walk a mile or run a mile. Just move around a little bit. Um, if you like to ride a bike, add an extra mile. Just one. Just one. Maybe next time add two. Maybe next time add three. Or don't. Or just, make a quick trip from here to there and just stop and take a breath and just, okay, and then go back. It's little things that affect the big picture. And that's what it's all about. It's all about making the internal and the external be more at balance, be more at peace with each other. So, um, that's Thelema and good old Aleister Crowley. And there's a lot more to that, just like there was a lot more to Wicca than what I got into last episode. And I encourage everybody to take a look into these things and to do some of your own study. I always encourage everybody to do your own research and to really follow up on a lot of things that I say, because I look at this from a general perspective when I present it to you, and there's a lot more to all of them than what I'm telling you. And it would make me feel good if anybody out there took things from this series and we're like, you know what, this helped me. I'm not going to convert to this or convert to that. And I'm not going to become a new whatever, but this helped me a little bit. I learned something today and it made me feel pretty good. And I'm using it in my life, and now my life is a little better. Maybe not dramatically better. Maybe not, maybe not everything is completely changed. But if you take anything from what I've been talking about, then that'll make you feel good. That'll make me feel good. Um, Now, next episode, I'm pretty sure I've decided on what I'm going to do for the next one already. It took me several days before I decided on this one because I wasn't sure what I wanted to follow up Wicca with, because Wicca was a big one. The next one I'm going to do is going to be a little on the silly side, or maybe it's not, because the people who are actually into it don't necessarily believe it's silly, or maybe they do believe it's silly, and that's the point. I'm going to be getting into the flying spaghetti monster. Well, hopefully not getting into the flying spaghetti monster. That's too close for comfort. But I'm going to be examining that archetype and Pastafarianism. I am. I'm going to get in there and see about what that's all about the noodly appendage and all that stuff. Because there are a lot of these, and it was declared a legal religion, I think. I'm pretty sure it was declared a legal religion, along with in the UK, Jedi is a legal religion. And I'm going to eventually get to that one as well, because having been a Star Wars fan for quite a while, not as much, in the last few years, because of anybody who's watched the Disney adaptations is probably on the same token with me. Maybe you're not. Maybe you think I'm full of it and you're going to stop watching the whole series because I've just said that as my opinion. But as an old school pre-Disney Star Wars kid, the Jedi thing is interesting to me, especially considering how people can really look at that and be like, oh, you know what? Yeah. And I'm going to be looking into some of the neo-pagan, like Viking stuff in the future and that kind of thing as well. We're going to get into a lot of things, a lot of different things in this series. I don't think this series is going to go on forever. I don't think this is going to be like a 50, 60, 70 episode continuing thing, because I don't think I can keep it going for that long. I think eventually there's probably enough niche spiritualities out there, but I think I'm going to run out of steam before that. So I think this is going to be like a mini series, kind of, or a telenovela, maybe. I don't know, however you want to say it. But that's what I'm going to do next week. The next episode is going to be the flying spaghetti monster. All right. This cat's looking at me like, are you out of your head? Are you sure? Really? Spaghetti monster? So yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. I'm gonna wrap it up about 5 minutes early. Um, if there's other things that you guys want to suggest that I get into, then leave a comment or send me an email. You can send an email either. Well, send it to the Spirits Club address. Send it to uncannyspiritsclub@gmail.com. Because that's my spider does things one, and that way it won't clog up the main Uncanny Earth one for Rob when he's trying to get guests and things like that. Um, and guests also, if you want to be a guest on the show and you are into any of the religions or spiritualities that I've been talking about, like if you consider yourself a Wiccan, if you consider yourself a Thelemite, if you consider yourself a Pastafarian or a Jedi or any of these other things, and you're serious about it, by all means, let me know. I will have you on the show, and you can talk to me about how you feel, and maybe you can educate me on some things that maybe I've gotten wrong. It's always possible. It's always possible. I am not infallible as far as this stuff goes. So that's it. Once again, I want to thank Ingrained Cyclist for being here and for tossing some good comments and questions at me. What do I have? This is Saturday, so there's nothing on Sunday as far as I'm aware. Monday, there will be another episode of Let's Talk About This, the podcast, and I will be talking about bowling. Bowling. I'm not very good at it. I haven't bowled in forever, but we're going to talk about bowling. Bowling leagues, bowling balls, bowling pins, bowling alleys. How drunk do you have to be really good at it or not? How sober do you have to be? Who knows? So that's Monday. Tuesday is another Twitch Tuesday where I play a game I have never played before on Twitch. And Wednesday is a free day. Thursday is another episode of the Uncanny Spirits Club. And Friday, of course, is one more brand new episode of This Uncanny Earth. It's a stacked week, not too many days off. Hope you guys can tune in for all that kind of stuff. Please like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. And until next time, be well.